So today is the 25th anniversary of the release of the Game Boy Advance in Japan. It was released on March 21st, 2001. This is my childhood Game Boy Advance that I got in February of 2002 from Toys R Us, which has since closed. But I still remember it very vividly. I picked up Mario Advance 2, which is the Mario World remake on Game Boy Advance. And I justified it to my mom that there are 93 levels and I'll play for a long time and, you know, all that stuff you say when you're a kid. So I have a lot of affinity for this console. This and the Game Boy Color were my two childhood systems that I played a lot. And as you can see, my childhood copy still works perfectly fine. But a few years ago, I modded another Game Boy. I actually modded my childhood friend's system. With an IPS screen, made it a lot nicer to look at. And I also painted the shell like an arcade carpet style, I think using Posca markers. So this has been my daily driver, you could say, for any Game Boy Advance games. But there are, there's still some flaws with these kind of systems. A lot of people note that the audio sounds worse when you put an IPS screen, especially at higher brightnesses. Amplifier mods will make the noise more noticeable. This one doesn't have any amplifier mods in it. It's just a new screen. And I never really cared too much about the audio, but you can definitely tell there's some humming that goes on in the background sometimes, especially when you have the higher brightnesses or when you're playing with an EverDrive. You can kind of hear it. And then there's some other quality of life things that could be taken care of with mods. So to that end, for the past year or two, I've been working on this Game Boy Advance model on and off, and I think I'm finally at the point where I can talk about it. And on the 25th anniversary, I was hoping to get it done by now, but there are still some things to take care of. This is the AGBM. That's what I'm calling it. The code name for the system, for the Game Boy Advance, was the AGB, and you can see that on circuit boards right there. AGB CPU-10, this one. So this one is the AGBM-CPU. This specific one is -11. I have another one that uses double A's. That's going to be the -01. That's going to be the default. I don't have any of those boards, though, because I haven't ordered any yet. But I ordered this one to test out everything. And I'll be calling this mod the Game Boy Enhance. Kind of a little play on words there. Thank you to the Modded Game Boy Club for that suggestion. So there's some quality of life improvements. Obviously, you can see here there's a lithium-ion battery. I'm still a little skittish about making lithium-ion battery systems, but this whole project will be open source, so do with it what you will. This system, it works pretty nicely. I have a laminated screen I'm using here from High Speed Ido, or however you call it. And the nice thing about this system, the thing I was focusing most on was the audio. And so looking at the design of the Game Boy Advance, especially when I was working on the Open GBA with Red Herring, that's a 2-layer board. Not to get too technical about the inner workings of the Game Boy, but what happens when you add all these IPS mods and other things on top of the original regulator is that you're overpowering it. It's not designed necessarily to drive all of these extra mods. Especially these screens, they can draw a lot of power depending on which ones you get. So when that happens, to put it in layman's terms, the power quality gets pretty bad. And it starts getting a lot of ripple on top of the supply. And that couples into the audio amplifier, and you can hear that. And that's why at higher brightnesses, especially when it's drawing more power from the system, you can hear the noise a lot worse. So first and foremost, this has a modern high-frequency switching power supply, but it also uses something called a single-point ground. And that's basically, again, not to get too technical, but you can kind of think of it as the audio I have over here. All this audio circuitry is on an almost completely separate circuit than the rest of the circuit, the rest of the board. So the power shouldn't interfere with the audio quality. And I've taken some recordings, and it's pretty nice. So I'll do some movie magic here. Here is what the original Game Boy Advance with this IPS modded screen sounds like. And here is what it sounds like on the AGBM. So yeah, it sounds better, to put it lightly. So again, I'm going to have a LiPo version, and I'm going to have a AA version. I didn't do a lot of testing with the AA's yet. I have hacked this up. I have a version of this hacked up that uses AA's just to make sure everything works. And I've had to change a few things, to get it working. And the audio still sounds really good on that too. So I'm pretty hopeful that it might even sound better in the end, because some of the ways I had to lay things out. Honestly, it should probably sound the same, but I don't want to flip this over because it's kind of ugly on the back. But you can see the front. There's 3 LEDs up here. That's a nice little feature. I was able to squeeze all 3 of them in there. Power, high power, low power, and charging. The AA version won't have the charging LED, obviously. It has points for tactile buttons. I didn't put LEDs on this, mostly because I don't really care about LEDs a whole lot. But my friend Natalie the Nerd has LED kits that should be compatible with this. I'll try to get one to test out at some point. The other thing I've added to this, I'm not going to reveal everything. There's not a ton new, but to be completely honest, but one of the cool things I added, on the MGBC, the Game Boy Pocket Color, I added a thumb wheel to control the brightness, all the touch screen functions of the IPS kits. Instead of the contrast wheel, there's it's called a navigation switch. I don't have an equivalent contrast wheel on the Game Boy Advance to play with. So what I instead did was added some logic. It's actually these chips up here. So that you can put in different button combinations to control the touchscreen inputs. So I have it so that if you press L, start and select, and then press A or B, you can activate the touch controls. And then also, if you press up at the same time, that will reset the system. So that's kind of like a soft reset, a universal soft reset. So the other cool thing about this that I tried really hard to do was find new parts to put everything on here, so you don't have to rely on like a really nice donor cartridge or a donor system. You only need the CPU and the RAM. Everything else can be bought new. Most of it can be bought new off of like DigiKey or Mouser. Some of the parts you have to get off of like retro gaming sites. The LNR buttons, for example, the ones you can get on DigiKey kind of fit, but you kind of have to bend some of the pins out. It's a little awkward, and they're a little bit clickier than the original LNR buttons, but those are pretty easy to get online. So not too concerned about that. The cartridge connector you have to get from aftermarket seller, or you can use a donor console. I actually found the cartridge connector was a lot easier to get off of Game Boy Advances than they were to get off Game Boy Colors. So that was a nice surprise. And then also, I'm I have to test this on the next revision, but I'm pretty hopeful that this power switch here is brand new from DigiKey. It only costs like 70 cents. It's not a drop-in replacement for an original Game Boy, so you can't buy these and put them on original Game Boys. If you need a replacement for that, you still need to buy the replacement ones that you can get on like the aftermarket stores. But this Switch is brand new and it fits in the space, and it should, if my measurements are correct, it should fit within the actual plastic slider on the shelf. So I'm very hopeful that this will be a good replacement. If not, I do have pads for the original power switch as well. Another thing that a lot of Game Boys have problems with are dirty power switches that on original systems can ruin your battery life because it's not actually delivering full power from the battery because it's dropping some of that power across the switch, and then also it can ruin the audio quality. So even if you have to use an original Game Boy switch, this power switch that I have here, the power switch circuit, just controls the enable line to the entire system. So main power does not flow through the switch, which makes things a lot better. And this is getting a little technical, I guess, for this overview of a video, but I'm trying to think of what else. There's a new audio jack that I have to check to make sure it fits. I'm pretty hopeful for that too. But yeah, it's coming together nicely. I'm planning to have this done by the US release date of the Game Boy Advance, which was June 11th, I believe. So the plan right now is to have this done by June 11th. I will only be selling the AA versions, but the lithium-ion versions will be available on GitHub. And this is assuming everything goes through without a hitch. I'm not anticipating any problems with the AA version, but I technically haven't tested it yet, so just stay tuned for that. Yeah, so that's my exciting update. I'll be posting more about this as I work on it. Yeah, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching.